The galaxy had long whispered of the war that nearly ended Earth. How, in a flash of fire and fury, the once mighty cradle of humanity was left in ruins. No one alive today could truly grasp the horrors of the Battle of Soul, how humanity's greatest achievement became its greatest downfall. The Interstellar Council, a coalition of 23 alien species, had decided that Earth's expansion into the stars was a threat they could not afford to ignore. Their preemptive strike wiped out human civilization in a single, unprovoked blow. But something wasn't right. The annihilation wasn't as clean as the Council had hoped. The destruction of Earth had been brutal, leaving behind only smoldering ashes, broken cities, and the lingering sense that something had been left unfinished. For decades, the galaxy had moved on, its political machine running smoothly without any trace of the humans who had once spread across the stars. But a shift was coming. In the shadowy corners of the galaxy, beyond the pristine worlds of the Council and their peacekeeping fleets, a new force was beginning to stir. Rumors started small, just whispers at first. A freighter lost without a trace. A mining vessel that never returned from the borders of the Daxar Rift. On the fringes of the Outer Rim, trading convoys reported strange, silent ships that appeared out of nowhere, then vanished just as quickly, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. Then came the first real sign that something had changed. A solitary signal, broadcast on a frequency long abandoned by the Council, emerged from the depths of space. A simple message, encoded in ancient Terran dialects, but one word stood out above all others: revenge. The message flickered in and out of systems across the galaxy, like a ghost that refused to die. No one knew where it had come from, or who was behind it. The Council scrambled to decipher its meaning, but it was too late. It was the beginning of something much larger. A small trade vessel, the Nurkash, was the first to encounter what no one had expected. Somewhere in the cold blackness of the Tsara Nebula, the Nurkash was ambushed by ships that didn't belong. Unlike any vessels in the known galaxy, they were fast, too fast, and terrifyingly precise. The freighter was boarded, but the crew was never found. Only the wreckage remained, drifting in the vacuum, its comm systems destroyed, its data cores wiped clean. But the galaxy noticed the symbol left behind. A human flag, tattered and scorched, but unmistakable in its design. It was the same one that had flown over Earth's cities before the war, faded but undeniable. The galaxy went silent. A decade had passed since the human race was presumed extinct. Yet this single act, this return of an ancient symbol, told the galaxy all it needed to know. Humanity had not forgotten. And as the first attacks began, no one could predict how far the consequences would stretch or how deep the wounds would go. The galaxy had thought it had buried the ghosts of Earth. But some ghosts, it seemed, could never die. The Council had been prepared for many things: alien uprisings, rogue AI rebellions, the occasional political insurrection among its member species. But this was unlike anything they'd ever faced. The Nurkash had been the first to disappear, but it wasn't the last. The Council's most secure trade routes, once deemed impenetrable, were suddenly under assault. Merchant ships, diplomatic fleets, even military convoys were being picked off with terrifying precision. There were no ransom demands, no messages, just empty space, cold and silent, with only the wreckage to tell the story. Then, reports of the ships began to surface, sleek, dark silhouettes that seemed to appear from nowhere. They moved faster than anything the Council had seen, slipping in and out of systems like shadows, impossible to track. Each attack followed the same pattern: a sudden strike, overwhelming force, then an eerie silence. Nothing was ever taken from the wreckage, only the fear remained. The Council was frantic. They convened emergency sessions, calling upon the best analysts, strategists, and intelligence operatives from each species to get to the bottom of this enigma. But there was nothing to go on. No clear pattern, no discernible motive, no hint of who or what was responsible. Ambassador Kale of the Velari, a species renowned for their diplomatic skills and razor-sharp intellect, was the first to voice what others dared not even consider. "It's them," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, though the weight of his words settled heavily in the chamber. "It's humanity. They've returned." The room fell deathly quiet. For a moment, no one spoke. The Velari had long held a bitter grudge against humanity, citing their rapid expansion and unpredictable nature as the cause of the war. The Council had agreed, in secret, to take swift action to eliminate the human threat before it could destabilize the galaxy, but to acknowledge the possibility that the humans might have survived, and were now striking back, was more than most could stomach. "We can't be sure," said Councillor Varkor, a hulking Xanthian with the voice of thunder. His species had once feared humanity's potential for warfare, and the thought of them returning was enough to send his many tusks quivering. "But the signs are there. The flag, the attacks. This is no coincidence." Ambassador Kale leaned forward, his expression grim. "It's more than coincidence. These are coordinated strikes, not random acts of vengeance. Someone is in control. Someone who has learned to manipulate the shadows of our world." His words sent a ripple of dread through the Council. The attacks were more sophisticated than anything a scattered human resistance could achieve. It was as if humanity had never been gone at all. No, they'd been preparing, biding their time, and now they were hunting. "Perhaps we've underestimated them," murmured Councillor Alara of the Arifians, a race of highly intelligent, telepathic beings who had long remained neutral in galactic affairs. "But we can't just hide behind our complacency. We need to find them before they find us." The Council was no longer speaking in whispers. The stakes had shifted. It was no longer about avoiding a war. It was about survival. But how do you fight an enemy that doesn't reveal itself? How do you combat a foe that has the ability to strike from nowhere, to leave nothing but fear in their wake? Then, as if to answer that question, the transmission came. A distorted message, fragmented but clear enough to send shivers down the spine of every counselor who heard it. The voice, low and clipped, carried an unmistakable weight. "You thought you could bury us. You thought you could destroy us. We remember. And now, we will make you remember." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving only static. The room remained silent for a long time. No one moved. No one dared to speak. The message was clear. The humans were not just returning. They were coming for revenge. And this time, they weren't afraid. The Council had always believed that they could contain the chaos of a few rogue factions, but this was different. Humanity's return wasn't just a threat. It was an existential one. No one in the galaxy had seen anything like it. The unknown ships that had appeared were unlike anything in the Council's vast arsenal of knowledge, their tactics seemingly engineered to destroy and disappear before retaliation could even begin. The next attack was a blow that rattled the Council to its core. The Velican Expanse, a system that housed one of the Council's most strategic trade hubs, went silent. Every freighter, every comms channel, every system was dead. The Velican system, once teeming with the hum of interstellar commerce, was now a graveyard, its orbital stations shattered, its planets bereft of life. The only clue left behind was the insignia of a human flag, burned, tattered, but unmistakable. The Council was no longer merely concerned, it was terrified. Ambassador Kale of the Velari stood before the Council once more, his face tight with the strain of the growing crisis. The alien delegation was split. Some were calling for an immediate retaliatory strike, hoping to crush any trace of humanity's resurgence. Others argued that such a move would only escalate the violence. Some species, still haunted by memories of the war, even advocated for a diplomatic solution, though the idea seemed ludicrous to others. "We've been too passive," Kale declared. "Humanity's return isn't just about vengeance. It's about their survival. They've been preparing for this moment since their destruction, and they're coming back stronger than ever. We must take action. and we must take it now. Counselor Varkor slammed his fist on the table. You speak as if we have no choice, Kel. We have to find them first and... Before he could finish, the room's holographic display flickered, and a new transmission was received. It was encrypted, but the language was unmistakable. It was Terran, Old Terran. A slow, methodical voice echoed through the chamber. We are coming. Earth is not lost. Earth never was. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The message wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. The humans weren't just attacking. They were preparing. Their world, once reduced to ashes, was being rebuilt, reforged, and they had made sure the galaxy would feel the heat of that rebirth. Ambassador Kel's expression darkened. This is what we feared. They're not just remnants of a fallen species. They're a new force. And they've learned. They've adapted. A series of reports began flooding in from across the galaxy, each one more disturbing than the last. Colonies on the fringes of known space reported sightings of human-designed warships, but not like the ones used during the war. These ships were sleeker, faster, and far more lethal. The attacks were growing bolder, more precise. The survivors spoke of a presence they couldn't quite define, a sense that the humans were always one step ahead. Then, another piece of evidence emerged, too troubling to ignore. An old human communications relay, long thought abandoned, suddenly activated. The signal, originating from Earth itself, echoed across every frequency and was intercepted by Council surveillance ships. The message was clear, simple, and chilling. We're waiting. The Council was facing a truth they were unprepared for. The survivors of humanity had not only rebuilt, but had learned to hide in the shadows. They had adapted, grown stronger, and most importantly, had never forgotten. The ashes of Earth were not the end. They were the beginning of something far more dangerous. The galaxy was no longer dealing with a species trying to survive. It was facing an enemy with a singular purpose: revenge. The Council's panic was no longer a whisper, it was a roar. The mysterious ships had grown bolder, their strikes more calculated. Entire sectors were becoming ghost towns, their fleets and trade routes systematically dismantled. Worst of all, there was no clear pattern to the destruction. The attacks didn't follow the usual strategies of war. There was no declaration of hostility, no demand for surrender, just cold, relentless efficiency. Entire systems were left in ruins, yet nothing of value was ever stolen, nothing of material worth. The question that haunted every mind was, why? Ambassador Kale called for an emergency council session. This time, it wasn't just the Velari delegation at the table. Leaders from every major species gathered, their expressions grim, their demeanor tense. The stakes had reached a level where no one dared be idle. The time for diplomacy has passed, Kale said, his voice steady, yet laced with unease. We need answers. We need to find the source of these attacks, before they find us. But as the meeting unfolded, a darker possibility began to emerge. We've been looking at this all wrong, said Counselor Varkor, his massive frame stiff with unease. We've been assuming this is the work of a single fleet. That's what we all thought, wasn't it? That they had some secret military force. He paused, narrowing his eyes. But what if this is something more insidious? A ripple of confusion ran through the room. Varkor wasn't known for his subtlety, and his words hung heavy in the air. What do you mean? Asked Counselor Alara, her voice a mixture of curiosity and concern. The Erythians were telepathic, and it was rare that anything unsettled them. But this was different. The threat was too abstract. Varkor continued, his tusks grinding together in frustration. What if they've never left? What if, instead of a military fleet, we're dealing with something far more dangerous? Sleeper cells, hidden throughout the galaxy, embedded in every corner of the Council's territory. The implications were immediate and chilling. Sleeper cells, human operatives planted in neutral territories, in Council planets, even in trade routes. These weren't scattered remnants. They were a network, A covert operation designed to infiltrate and strike from within. The room fell silent as the gravity of Varker's words sunk in. "We've seen the attacks come from all over," said Kale. "Different regions, different species, different fleets. If this is a coordinated effort, it's far more sophisticated than we imagined. These cells are working in tandem, and they're waiting for us to make a move. They know exactly how we'll react." A new plan of action was immediately set into motion. The Council dispatched special reconnaissance teams, composed of the most elite operatives from across the galaxy, to infiltrate suspected human strongholds. Their mission: to find out what was really happening on Earth, to uncover the network of sleeper cells before it was too late. But as the operatives began their investigations, another disturbing development emerged. A human-created artifact was discovered in the debris of a recently attacked station, something unlike any technology the galaxy had ever encountered. It was a compact device, seemingly unassuming at first glance, but it was connected to something far more intricate, a neural network, one that had been activated remotely. The intelligence reports were clear. This was not a weapon. This was a signal, a call to action. Someone, somewhere, was watching, waiting. And the Council had unwittingly played into humanity's hands. As the operative reports poured in, one chilling detail stood out above all. Earth wasn't just a sanctuary. It was the heart of a sprawling, invisible empire, one that was thriving, unseen, and pulling the strings. The hunt for humanity's resurgence had just begun, but the galaxy was already at a disadvantage. The real question wasn't whether the humans would strike again, but when. The Council was beginning to realize just how unprepared they truly were. Humanity's sleeper cells, once a whispered suspicion, had now been confirmed as a terrifying reality. As the investigation teams scoured the galaxy, they found more and more signs, small, seemingly innocuous devices scattered across trade routes, research stations, and neutral systems. These devices weren't weapons. They were nodes connected to something larger, something hidden deep within the fabric of the galaxy. The quiet presence of these devices, linked through a vast, invisible network, was beginning to make sense. They were not just awaiting activation. They were feeding information. They were gathering intel, siphoning resources, and planting the seeds for a larger return. Each one was a piece of a puzzle that the Council was too slow to piece together. And now it was almost too late. The most disturbing discovery came when an elite team of operatives uncovered something buried deep within the ruins of an abandoned Earth station, a hidden databank, untouched for centuries. The databank contained detailed records of humanity's darkest hour, but it also held something else. A blueprint, coded in a language long thought extinct, a blueprint for an enormous interconnected system of human operatives spread across the galaxy, poised for a coordinated resurgence. The network wasn't just a series of attacks. It was a complex, multi-layered operation, one that had been carefully nurtured since the fall of Earth. A plan not just for revenge, but for reclamation. Humanity had never truly been eradicated. Instead, it had gone underground, like a seed buried beneath a weight of ash, waiting for the right moment to sprout again. The intelligence was clear. Earth had never been destroyed. It had been abandoned. The humans had rebuilt, laying the groundwork for a new order. An order where the galaxy's former conquerors would once again reclaim their dominion. Ambassador Kell's voice trembled as he spoke to the Council in the emergency session that followed. "We've made a grave mistake. We thought Earth was nothing but a burned-out husk, a dead world. But it was never gone. It was always there, hidden from us. And now we're seeing the fruits of that long-buried plan." Councillor Varker slammed his fist onto the table. "We've been blind, letting them work in the shadows for far too long. We need to act. We cannot allow humanity to take root again, to rise from the ashes and challenge us once more." Kale nodded grimly. "But it's not that simple. They've already infiltrated us. These sleeper cells, these devices, They've been embedded in our infrastructure for years. We don't know who is loyal anymore. They've adapted. The room fell silent, the weight of Cal's words sinking in. The council was fractured now. Some were willing to fight, others to negotiate, but none were sure who their real enemies were. Humanity had learned to blend into the fabric of galactic society, and now it was impossible to tell friend from foe. Then, as if to remind them of just how far the humans had come, a new transmission was received. It was encoded, but the message was unmistakable in its simplicity. The galaxy is ours. You are only borrowing it. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the council in stunned silence. The meaning was clear. Humanity wasn't just back. They were taking ownership of the stars once more. The council was no longer facing an isolated faction of survivors. They were facing the return of a civilization, one that had been reborn in secret, its claws ready to dig into the fabric of the galaxy. And the galaxy wasn't ready. The galaxy had never felt this small. The once immense expanse of stars now seemed to close in around the council. There was no denying it anymore. Humanity wasn't just alive. It was organized, strategic, and prepared for war. The network of sleeper cells had taken root across countless systems, manipulating trade routes, sabotaging communications, and infiltrating key military installations. It wasn't a series of attacks. It was an insidious campaign of destabilization. And now, the time for subtlety was over. The transmission that had echoed through the council chambers still lingered in the minds of every leader. The galaxy is ours. You are only borrowing it. The arrogance of the message, combined with its certainty, sent a chill down the spine of every council member. Humanity wasn't begging for a place at the table. They were taking their seat back, forcefully, if necessary. In response, the council issued a formal declaration of war. It was a decision long feared, but now unavoidable. Ambassador Kale, still reeling from the revelations of humanity's resurgence, stood before the assembly and delivered a chilling address. The time for diplomacy has passed. We face an enemy who has been patient, watching us, learning from us, and waiting. We cannot wait any longer. If we do, we risk losing everything. It was clear to everyone in the room. Humanity's return wasn't just a political threat. It was a direct challenge to the Council's power, a declaration that the peace they'd enjoyed for centuries was over. The stakes had shifted from survival to dominance. The Council called upon every species to commit forces to a single unified fleet. The galaxy's combined military might would descend upon Earth to eradicate what was thought to be a dead world and extinguish the threat before it could spread further. But as the fleets began to mobilize, a new unsettling development took place. The Silent Armada, the mysterious fleet humanity had quietly assembled over the years, made its move. As the Council's warships neared Earth's atmosphere, the first wave of human ships emerged from hidden bunkers beneath the surface of Mars and the outer moons of Jupiter. They were faster, stronger, and deadlier than any ship in the Council's fleet. The initial clash was swift and brutal. The Council's ships, though numerous and formidable, were no match for the precision and speed of the human fleet. Within hours, the first skirmishes turned into full-blown engagements, the human ships swarming over the Council's forces like predators upon prey. They were everywhere, striking with an almost unnatural efficiency, and then disappearing into the shadows before reinforcements could arrive. The technology of the human ships was unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. Their weapon systems were devastating, capable of piercing through even the toughest armor. And their tactics were alien. Unlike the Council's rigid, regimented approaches, humanity's strategy was fluid, unpredictable, and almost instinctual. It was clear that this war would not be won by sheer force alone. The Council's fleets were being driven back, their fleets falling apart under the brutal assault. But the worst part was the silence. The human ships didn't broadcast their intentions. There were no demands, no threats, no speeches. They simply struck, hard, fast, and without mercy. As Counselor Alara of the Erythians stood before the holographic map of the battlefield, her telepathic abilities pulsed with fear. The map was filled with red, human vessels cutting through the Council fleet like a knife through flesh. They're not just fighting us. They're hunting us. The words hit like a hammer. The realization dawned on the Council. Humanity wasn't just seeking revenge. They were eradicating everything in their path. This wasn't just about reclaiming Earth. It was about reclaiming the galaxy, piece by piece. The battle for the galaxy had begun, and the Council had underestimated their enemy. Humanity wasn't just a relic of a dead species. It was the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever faced. The galaxy was unraveling at a staggering pace. What had started as a coordinated series of isolated strikes had now erupted into full-scale conflict. Humanity's silent armada, its true strength now fully revealed, had delivered the first of many crushing blows to the Council. The initial waves of attacks had shattered the Council's pride, but it was only the beginning. In every skirmish, humanity's fleet showed an uncanny ability to strike without warning, overwhelming the Council's forces with precision and speed. They didn't just fight with superior technology. They fought with something far more dangerous. Tactics born from years of exile, of waiting, of adapting. The Council was scrambling. Its fleets, though vast, were disjointed, divided between the vast expanse of the galaxy and ill-prepared for the lightning-fast assaults humanity had mastered. To make matters worse, humanity wasn't just relying on military might. The sleeper cells they had seeded across the galaxy were now fully operational, creating chaos in Council-controlled systems. Sabotage, misinformation, and manipulation of local governments were sowing confusion and division among the galactic powers. There was no longer any certainty about who could be trusted. Ambassador Kale convened an emergency meeting with the remaining Council leaders in a desperate attempt to turn the tide. The meeting room was tense, the weight of failure pressing down on every leader's shoulders. "We cannot continue like this," Kale said, his voice grave. "Humanity's network is far more advanced than we realized. They've infiltrated every corner of the galaxy, and it seems their attacks are designed to tear apart the very fabric of our unity." Counselor Varker, whose species had once held the title of the fiercest warriors in the galaxy, gritted his teeth. "We've fought battles before. But this is different. Humanity's tactics are too fluid. They're using our own systems against us. We're vulnerable on all fronts." Kale nodded. "They've learned to attack not just our fleets, but our very systems of governance. The sleeper cells, the sabotage, it's all part of their strategy to undermine us from within. They're not just fighting us, they're destroying the foundation of the Council itself." Alara, the telepathic counselor of the Erythians, remained silent for a long moment. Her mind reached out, probing the thoughts of those around her. Fear, panic, and a gnawing sense of inevitability filled the room. Finally, she spoke. "They're always one step ahead of us," she said, her voice haunted. "I can feel it. Humanity's ability to anticipate our moves is unnatural. We're facing an enemy who thinks like a shadow." Kale turned to the holographic map of the galaxy that hovered before them. Red dots, representing the areas under assault, spread like wildfire, swallowing up systems faster than the Council could respond. The silent armada was relentless. Each engagement brought more losses. Each defeat pushed the Council closer to collapse. The message was clear. Humanity was not just looking to reclaim what was once theirs. They were systematically dismantling the galactic order. "This is no longer about war," Kale said, a cold resolve setting into his voice. "It's about survival. We cannot continue to fight them head-on. We need to outthink them. We need to turn their own tactics against them." The room was quiet as the gravity of Cal's words sank in. The Council had always relied on strength and numbers, but it was becoming clear that humanity's war wasn't one of brute force. It was a war of intellect, subterfuge, and patience. As Cal's words echoed in the chamber, the faintest flicker of a new transmission appeared on the display screen. The message was brief, its tone almost mocking. "You are still trying to resist. This is just the beginning. We are everywhere. And soon, we will be the last ones standing." Humanity wasn't just coming for the galaxy. It was coming for everything. And now, the Council was faced with a harsh truth. The enemy they had underestimated had already won the war. It wasn't about who had the strongest fleet. It was about who controlled the future. The galaxy had fallen silent, the kind of silence that echoed with the weight of inevitable defeat. What was once an interconnected network of species, thriving under the rule of the Council, now seemed fragmented, splintered by the chaos humanity had unleashed. Systems that had once flourished under a fragile peace were now crumbling, their leaders uncertain of who to trust, and their fleets in disarray. Ambassador Kale sat alone in the command center, the weight of his decisions bearing down on him. He had seen the reports. The silent Armada, humanity's greatest weapon, had torn through every defensive line the Council had put up. The sleeper cells were still operating, sabotaging infrastructure, pulling at the very fabric of the Council's leadership. The war wasn't just one of military might. It was a war of the mind, and humanity was winning. But even as Cal sat there, his fingers tracing the cold surface of the table, a quiet realization began to take root. The Council could not win this war. Not through force. Not through conventional means. Humanity had outwitted them at every turn, each move more precise than the last. And yet, there was something else Cal could sense. Something humanity hadn't anticipated. The Council had been fractured for too long, their unity eroded by distrust, pride, and arrogance. But now, in the face of this overwhelming threat, something was stirring within them, a need for cooperation that had never existed before. If they had any hope of survival, they would have to adapt, just as humanity had. The plan was simple, but dangerous: unite or perish. The galaxy's various factions, each one once at odds with the other, would now have to set aside their differences. There would be no room for selfishness, no room for old grudges. The Council had to present a united front, one that would force humanity to face them head-on, and in a way the humans hadn't prepared for. It was the only chance they had. "We can't keep fighting on our terms," Kale muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We need to make them fight on our terms." The meeting had been called. Leaders from every corner of the galaxy gathered, some reluctantly, others with fervor, ready to make their final stand. The Erythians, the Velari, the Enarian, and every other faction sent their representatives to the table. For the first time in millennia, they were in agreement. Humanity had to be stopped, and they would stop them together. Kale addressed the room, his voice steady. "We have one last card to play. Humanity thinks they've won. They think we'll fall apart, that we'll scatter to the winds. But they don't understand us. Not really. We can't fight them like we did before. We need to be more than just soldiers. We need to be a united front." The room buzzed with tension, but for the first time in months, there was hope. They had underestimated humanity, but they still had one advantage: the ability to adapt, to learn, and to fight back. A plan was set into motion. The galaxy's fleets, now under a single command, would strike not at Earth, but at the heart of humanity's power, the hidden hubs where the sleeper cells were orchestrating the war from behind the scenes. They would target the infrastructure that humanity had relied on, cutting the network that had allowed them to remain a step ahead. But as the unified fleet prepared for its final assault, another transmission arrived. This one was different. It wasn't a boast or a challenge. It was a simple message, an offer of peace of sorts. "You can stop fighting now. The galaxy has already chosen. We're coming for everything. This is the end of your rule, the beginning of ours." The transmission flickered off. Ambassador Kale looked out at the vastness of space, his resolve hardening. This wasn't just about a war anymore. It was about the survival of the galaxy as they knew it. Humanity had made its move, and now it was up to the Council to make theirs. The final battle loomed on the horizon, and for the first time in a long time, the galaxy was united, not in fear, but in defiance. The war for the stars would be decided in a single final confrontation. Would humanity reign supreme, as they had always believed? Or would the Council, forged in unity and resolve, rise to defend their future? The battle had only just begun.